All right. Welcome, welcome. Hey, I just thought I'd do a quick presentation here for us. And that presentation is about how to set up a business process management system, right? How many times have how many people really in the transactional service worlds has a nice closed loop process management system where they can report on the metrics day in, day out. They know if their backlog is going up, if it's aging. What metrics do we track? What metrics do we put forward, right? That's always one of the bigger challenges I find when I go in to do consulting jobs, and especially around the service industries. Rarely do we have, or rarely do I find what I believe to be a really nice process management system that we can use to manage our processes day in and day out. And it's just the way it is. And most process managers, I'm looking at an individual process owner. If you're an individual process owner, this is meant for you, right? If you don't have a good set of metrics where every day you know how you performed and what's going up and what's going down, this is for you. And I'm just going to give you a quick intro into what this system looks like. I'm Dan Feliciano, OpEx 90. I'm a strategy and change consultant doing large business transformations. I've worked all over the world with some of the biggest companies in the world. And, not only doing business transportations, but doing Lean and Lean Six Sigma implementations. And one of the things that I found that's most interesting, especially in the service industries, is the ability to manage processes well and have a good data-driven management process system that we can look at as a closed loop system to manage too, right? Everyone says they can do this. Everyone says they know what's going on, but this is the first step. So if you want to start your year out right, this is what you need to do. And I'm going to just jump right into it and start sharing a presentation about an outline basically of how to get going. And I'm going to continue to do these live streams, if you will, for the next few times. In the next week or so, we'll go through all the steps that I've created for this. I call it the 6MX, right? It's just getting a basic process management system in place. And just doing this, you would be surprised at the improvements that you could actually put in place and get in place. So let's hop right into it. I'm going to share, just it's nothing formal, folks. This is pro bono, right? I'm not, this will be a course on itself, but I'm just giving you a high level intro into what this actually is. Okay, so this isn't the be all end all. So let's jump into the slide presentation here, and let's talk about it. Right. So this is, I always said before you start Lean or Six Sigma initiative, let's do this first. Have a process management system in place. I'll tell you, consultants love to go into service businesses, especially the Lean consultants, and say, hey, we're going to do a value stream map. And they list out all your process steps. And then they say, what are your metrics? What are your baseline, right? All those good things. And most people really don't have a clue, right? They haven't been brought up that way, right? You were promoted into this process management role because you did a job well. And rarely are you getting the kind of operations background that most people get. This is part of a larger framework, though. So if you're starting out on an initiative, let's just take a step back, right? If we want to stabilize our processes, standardize our processes, we want to optimize them in automation and then automate them. I'm telling you, if you're in a service industry or if you're in a rules-based business or industry, you need to be concerned about AI. AI's ability to, especially these new AI agents, they have an incredible ability to automate workflows, right? To manage processes well, to send emails out. I'm working with a bunch of great apps that are just doing that. But our first step is let's stabilize our process. And that's where this 6MX strategy comes in. Consider it basically a stabilization factor. And then we'll standardize your processes, optimize and automate your process. If you're looking for a longer term process improvement strategy, this would be one to consider. If you have any questions, just reach out to me. Let's start with what I'm really talking about here. Um, I've also been in operations where the process owners measure everything but their own performance, right? They always have all these alibis, all these other people have affected their process. They couldn't do it well. At the end of the day, I'm telling you, if you just get these 6 measures in place, you're rocking. On the left hand side here, right? Left hand side, what we're looking at here is input transactions, right? How many transactions came in today? Hour, whatever time frame makes best for you. We want to know what are the quantity of the items actually coming into our business, right? If we start measuring this day in and day out, we can see, is it trending up? Is it trending down, right? And keep in mind, we're talking about a closed loop system here, right? If something comes in, it's in our system till it goes out. So we want to keep track of this, right? Um, I'll give you a case in point where I implemented this in one organization, and we started tracking their transactions, and it was a IT industry, and all of a sudden we saw their incoming ticket volume go through the roof. The only reason we knew it went through the roof is because we were tracking it. Everything else remaining constant, right? If those incoming transactions are going through the roof, they're going to hit our backlog. In here, I have IPO, input, process, output measures. This is our backlog. This is backlog, work in process. Go ahead and split hairs. I'm not going to split hairs, but these are all the transactions that came in that have yet to be completed, right? So we want to understand, how old are these transactions? But that isn't good enough, right? Some people will say, hey, I know my backlog. Well, we need to know our aging backlog, right? Whatever our metric is, we want to make sure that we can understand, is our backlog getting older? And what I have here is, in this example here, I have 0 to 3 days is the green bar, 4 to 6 days is the pinkish, the magenta bar. 7+ days is greater, greater than 7 days. Let's say those categories make sense for us. So we're keeping an eye on our backlog, right? Everything else remaining constant. If we have a constant workforce, a constant ability to turn around transactions, right? We're going to learn to understand and how to interpret this, right? We're going to go through different scenarios. The outputs, the number of transactions we completed. If it's by day, great, it's by day. But we want to make sure we're completing the transactions, right? If we see the number of completed transactions going down and the backlog going up, that's a problem for us. I'm not going to talk about how we manage and measure that and go, what we do with that, but that's a problem for us. Here, you might have the average turnaround time of a closed transaction, right? Is our average turnaround time going up? Maybe you're going to use the 95th percentile or some other metric that is important to you to represent the turnaround time. And then over here, of course, we can have some sort of quality metric. In this case, it might be some time-bound metric, and we might say, what are the number of transactions, what a percentage of transactions that are defective, right? That exceed the standard that we put in place with our customers, right? This would be the end game, right? At the end of this process management, at the 6MX system that I have, this is going to be the dashboard that we use and that you would be taught in this closed loop system, how to manage this dashboard and how to understand what levers you might be able to pull. So we talked about stabilize, standardize, optimize, and automate. There's going to be a lot of automation going on soon. One of the things I discovered is a lot of people, a lot of little techie people have gone out and said, hey, we're going to automate your process, your workflow, and they're creating all these apps. They didn't go through all the due diligence of understanding all this work. So we're finding that these automations have failed miserably, and they're having to go back and fix them only because they didn't have a good mechanism in place to really understand the system that they're operating in. And I tell you, go to YouTube, go just do a quick search anywhere, and you're going to find all these people out there saying that we're going to automate your processes, but they have no idea of how to put a process management system in place or what questions to ask to ensure that this is going to be meaningful to you. So the 6MX process is simply this. Understand the mission of your process. So if you're a process owner, What is the mission of your process, right? What's the purpose? How does it align with organizational goals? And who are the stakeholders? Do you have a common understanding of what it is you're to deliver? This is your very first step. If you're going to train somebody, you're going to say, hey, here's our process, right? Here is the mission, the purpose of our process. And it doesn't have to get overly fluffy and stuff like that. This is just, what does this process do and who are the customers? Then we're going to map out the process, right? We're going to map out that process in a high level diagram. What are the 5 to 7 steps that get done here, right? This doesn't necessarily need to be a detailed process map. We just want to understand that workflow so that as we move forward, looking ahead, once we get all our systems in place, we're going to start looking for opportunities to improve that workflow, if you will. So we're going to map out our process to understand what it looks like. Now, some of us, if you were to like attend my BPMS training, the 6MX training here, we would start with, in this process, even though I'm saying map it at a high level, we're going to help you identify inefficiencies, redundancies. We're going to look for all the waste in the process and all the potential improvement opportunities that exist. We don't want to go crazy yet, though, because right now we don't have a good measurement system in place, right? We're not really sure how our process is performing, right? We're ad hoc managing this thing. And then it's developing the measures for that process. What are going to be our process measures, right? I did a lot of work in the federal government, and the process owners never had, I shouldn't say never, rarely had process measures around their process that they were managing responsible for. They had somebody else's metrics, someone upstream, and how they affected them. They had some metric that didn't mean anything to anyone, didn't talk about the customer experience, right? Talked about all this other nonsense, right? So we're going to understand what measures we need to have in place. And let's go back. These are the 6 measures you need right out of the gate, right? Everything else is fluff and stuff, or vanity metrics, or glory metrics, right? If you're in the federal government, you probably have 1,000 other things you have to report on, like diversity and things like that. I'm not talking about any of that nonsense right now. We're just talking about how do we manage our process. So get our measures in place. Now that we have our measures in place, how do we monitor those measures in real time as possible? I've been in some organizations where they got their metrics monthly. What the heck am I supposed to do monthly with metrics, right? The month is done and now I know how I did. That's horrible, right? So we're going to figure out what measures we need, right? And hopefully we'll start with these 6 measures. Everything else is ridiculous, right? Everything else are alibi measures or some other agenda metrics, but we're going to get our measures in place. We're going to identify where we're going to get those measures, and we can use a simple dashboarding tool. There's 1,000 of them out there that you can use, right? But we're going to gather those metrics. We're going to develop good operational definitions. And then we're going to monitor those measures, right? We need to have a dashboard, something similar to this. This came out of a system that decades ago that I had created, right? So now there's tons of dashboarding software, but we want to have these metrics somewhere where we can look at them and see how they're actually performing, right? As close to real time as possible so that we can make adjustments on the fly. And then using these metrics, right, we're going to the 5th phase here, manage. How do we manage to these metrics, right? Everything else remaining constant. Let's say we have a constant workforce, a constant turnaround time, right? A constant process. If everything else is constant, right, we can look at these measures and they're going to tell us what's happening. So if we see a spike in incoming transactions over here on this left-hand side, we should expect that to hit the backlog. Everything else remaining constant, we should expect that backlog to increase and maybe start to age out. So that's going to be a concern for us. So if we see those input transactions go up, we need to be concerned. At the same time, let's say we're looking at our metrics and all of a sudden our number of completed transactions is going down. If everything else is remaining constant and we're not getting the transactions completed, right, out of the system, we would expect our backlog to be going up. So that's what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about understanding our process, getting that mission statement, mapping it out, understanding how that process works, right, so that we can train people or so that we can automate it, right? You're going to see a lot of automation coming in, right? There's going to be a lot of people coming in and saying this is a non-value added activity and we need to automate it. We need to cut our costs down. So you get a jump on that game. So we're going to learn how to manage our metrics and then understand how to move and improve them, right? So we're going to look at our metrics. Now that we have baseline data in place, right, we can start to tinker with the process, but tinkering with the process in a very structured format so that we can make improvements to it and move forward. So that's what the 6MX system is all about. It's about getting an operational metric system in place. Now, everyone says, oh, yeah, I know how to do this. I've done that. Rarely is that the case. So I want to make sure that you're setting yourself up. You're setting yourself up for success. And this is just one way of doing it. This is a good groundwork. And by the way, if you're in the federal government or in some local government, we have this Doge thing coming out, which I think is fantastic. This might be another way of you demonstrating, if you don't have this in place, which I'm going to bet that if I came in and asked a bunch of questions, people would start going up, stuttering and stammering, right? This would be a good way to make sure you have your ducks in a row, if you will. So this is what this whole 6MX system is all about. It's about understanding your system. And right now, I'm just talking about your individual process areas, right? I'm not talking about a bigger system view. Many of you aren't going to work in this, in the lean world. We like to talk about, you can have the CEOs involved and they're doing this and it's important to the organization. Guess what? 99% of you aren't going to be there, right? But you shouldn't let them limit your success. This is the right thing to do. They'll appreciate it. If you go in and ask for a raise, right? You can say, hey, look, I implemented this metric system that we didn't really have in place before. I have leading indicators. I have lagging indicators. I've taught my team how to manage to the backlog. I know which levers to pull. I'd love to do this in the rest of the organization, right? I'm adding more value, right? I'm improving my quality. This is the way you can do those kind of things. So here in this missions, remember we have 6 phases: the mission, mapping, measuring, monitoring, managing, and then moving. Same as improving, right? I just used it to let it flow. So in this first phase, and I'm going to talk more about this, and I'm not going to go through my whole course with you, right? I'm just giving you some clues of what it looks like, right? So we're going to understand what a process mission statement is, why it's important, how to get the information. You may not have all the information right out of the gate to develop a good process mission statement, but we need to start with this, understanding who is our customer and who are our stakeholders, understanding the organizational goals, right? What should you be doing? Do you know what the standards are? I've been in a lot of organizations, especially in the federal government. There's just arbitrary goals thrown out there, and there's no ramifications for meeting them or not meeting them. There's always an excuse. I need more people, more money, more training, right? All those things. But we want to make sure that as we're looking at our process, it's going to align to the system, right? So at the simplest level and at the most basic level, just understanding what is our average turnaround time, what is our defect rate, and who set that. You shouldn't go crazy, right, with these metrics. And this is where you see a bunch of metrics coming up, and all those metrics that are coming up and that are being used, I call it chaff and redirect. They're meant to redirect people's attention to take away from the core things that are taking place. If you go back and look at these measures right here, these are the core measures. Everything else is chaff and redirect and alibis, right? And when I say chaff and redirect, we're trying to make sure people don't understand how poorly we're performing. So we're going to understand process mission statement, try to understand the goals. Sometimes I've seen it all the time. I've seen it too many times. What are your goals? I'm not really sure, not to get yelled at, So let's make sure we understand what it is that we're trying to do. If they're not in place, and I've seen that quite a bit, let's figure out, hey, what's going to be the standard, right? If you don't have a way of measuring your performance, how can you legitimately ask for a raise, or why would we actually need you, right? So then we'd craft that mission statement, write a nice little mission statement. And again, it doesn't have to be over the top, just a general understanding of who our customers are and what they need. Make sure we have a buy-in. We're not changing a lot here. We get hung up on this stakeholder buy-in, right? If you're not doing anything right now, you're not really measuring anything, no one's really haunting you and cares, you don't have to really worry about the organizational buy-in, because you're not you're not adding or deleting a lot of metrics. You're getting the very basic metrics I need to be successful, right? And just think about this as a process vital signs. We need to know how many transactions are coming in. We need to know the backlog. We need to know how they're aging, because guess what? People are going to game the system. That aging report is, I can tell you when we talk about it later on, I'll tell you how people have gamed it and why that came into play. We want to know how many transactions were completed, the turnaround time, or the average turnaround time, and the quality level. Those are your process vital signs. Everything else is chaff and redirect, if you will. So we're going to make sure we have that mission statement. We're going to get the buy-in, and then we're going to review and share that with our team, right? So that is part of this 6MX strategy. Let's just go back to that one more time, right? The 6MX strategy, understanding that process mission, mapping out our process, getting the right measures in place. And I'm recommending throw out everything else, or if you have to, keep them, but make sure you get the 6 measures that I've just been talking about, because that's going to create a beautiful closed loop system for you to measure, monitor, and manage, right? And then you can take all sorts of corrective action. You're going to be way ahead of the game. But we need to monitor these results, monitor them, and as real time as possible, right? I was in one organization, a federal agency, of course. They didn't understand their first quarter's performance until after the end of the second quarter. So can you imagine at the end of the game, all of a sudden, the score, it was wild card weekend, right? Can you imagine if you didn't know the score until the whistle blew and they said the game's over? That's kind of ridiculous, but that's the kind of environment a lot of you are working in or stuck in, but you can get out of that. So we're going to talk more about using this 6MX strategy to get your basic processes well managed so that you can be successful to start making improvements, right? I don't want you to start making improvements right out of the gate, because you're not going to, if you don't have all your measures in place, people, you could actually make it worse. So let's get our system baseline. Let's understand how we're performing, and then we'll put the improvements in place, right? I see people get hurried. They haven't done anything for a decade, and now all of a sudden they're anxious and they're going to start doing something. But don't be that kind of person. Just wait it out and go through these processes so that you can measure and monitor those processes going forward. And this is part, I'm going to go back. This is part of a bigger overall strategy. So we're going to stabilize our processes, right? We're understanding how our process is operating. Once we get it stabilized and we get these 6MX metrics in place, we can do this again. We can go in and standardize the process. Make sure everyone's doing the work the same way. Make sure we have the right standard operating procedures, right? Making sure that we can eliminate waste or inefficiencies or improve the process, but we have to have measures to go back and measure. And then probably automate the processes. You'll hear people say that we shouldn't automate our processes because we're going to make mistakes and things like that. People make mistakes, right? All the time, right? When we say that, oh, AIs can make mistakes, so can people. Oh, AI can be hacked and get rid of our data, so can people, right? People are going to take that data with them when they leave, right? Look at how many breaches we've had, and those breaches were people driven, right? They weren't AI driven. So again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about putting this process management system in place. And then in our next presentation, it'll probably be Wednesday, I'm going to talk more deeply about how to go ahead and set up this mission statement and key things to look for, right? This isn't going to be, if you want to take a class on this and stuff like that, I do these workshops and stuff like that for organizations to set them up. But we're going to talk through each one of these phases. mapping. Next is going to be the process mapping, then followed by the measures, then followed by a monitoring system, understanding that dashboard in more detail, then managing, using that dashboard. We'll go through some exercises, and then move as the improvements of the process. But let's go back why I decided to do this based on this slide right here. What I've seen too often is we bring in consultants, or someone gets, hey, we have to do this right away. And the consultants love this, right? I was a consultant. Let's develop a value stream map, knowing that these metrics don't exist, right? And if I come to your organization and you want to do a business transformation or set up a system, the first thing we're going to do is put this, everyone's going to get trained on 6MX. We're going to put all these measures in place so that we can have an intelligent conversation. We're not going to start wasting time drawing out a value stream map and then finding out all these measures don't exist, because we know they don't exist, right? And we're going to start stable, and we're going to get a jump on this, hopefully stabilizing our processes so that we can standardize them. And then we're going to make smart moves about where to go next. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about a strategy called discontinuous flow, where we start at the end of our process to make improvements and we move upstream, right? Rather than going all in and moving a lot of things around. We might have some confounding factors if we do something like that. But this is what I wanted to highlight, because I'm seeing a lot of people doing the wrong things. I'm seeing a lot of people doing automations without having this understanding in place, if you will. So if you're interested in this, hey, keep an eye out, like, share, comment, right? You know, I get a lot of emails. People are seeing the videos and doing this. I get emails. Do me a favor, just like and share this rather than just send me an email. You can put some comments in there. But a lot of you are finding this useful, but for some reason, you're reluctant. Maybe you don't want anyone to know, but you're reluctant to follow, like, and share, right? So I get these emails or these text messages. Hey, Dan, what about this? Yeah, well, let's see what other people think as well, right? Because there's a lot of you out there. So I'm Dan Feliciano from OpEx 90. And we've been talking about how to develop a basic process management systems infrastructure, if you will, so that we can be successful, right? We talked about having a mission statement for our process. What's our mission? And it doesn't have to be this crazy, ludicrous stuff that you see on many organizations' websites, right? I'm talking about what's the purpose of that process, mapping that process, making sure we have the right measures in place that are actionable, right? Not some hokey thing that we can't do anything about, right? Have a good monitoring system in place. It doesn't do us any good if we get these metrics, you know, in the second quarter. We need to get these metrics in real time. So we need to monitor these metrics. Then we need to understand and how to manage these metrics, right? Looking at these graphs tells us a lot of information, and then how to drive improvements. So I'm Dan Feliciano from OpEx 90. Keep an eye out. We will be doing more of these presentations, especially around the BPMS system, right? I know my videos up to this point have been about the most critical, the skills that we're seeing lacking the most in industry right now. Critical thinking, everyone says they have that. Complex problem solving, everyone says they have that. Data literacy, everyone has that. Data literacy includes statistics, data analytics, everyone says they have that. And strategy, right? Everyone says they're a strategist, right? If you go to this little website down here that I have, strategygpt.opex90.com, I've actually created a strategy bot that's phenomenal, right? I have a meeting tomorrow with an organization that possibly wants to borrow this, but the consulting firms are signing up for this bot because it's so good. It tells us so much information. It helps us move forward. So I know I ruffled some feathers by exposing people who said they're strategists, right? When you start looking at these tools, these techniques, and people are like, oh, what is that? I don't know that. These are what I'm doing in this bot are the very basics of strategy that every strategist should know, right? So take a look at that as well. So keep an eye out. We're transitioning from the strategy bot. You know, I've been doing a lot of stuff around the strategy GPT to basic business process management systems, getting that in place. If you learn this You get it in place, I guarantee you, you're going to have a great year. Your first quarters, you're going to get everything under control. You're going to be able to stabilize it. You'll have data. You have a data-driven process, and maybe into the future we can talk about how to analyze it, right? And I'm now including this in my green belt and black belt training, right? This process management, having a process manage, a specified structured process management systems in place. So in my Lean Six Sigma green belt and black belt training, we're covering AI. I have, and including chatbots, AI and automation, how to use Chat GPT and all the other large language models, how to leverage them. We're going to be talking about business process management systems, and I'm going to show you how you can leverage these tools to be awesome. Because if you're not learning AI, automation, and AI agents, you're going to get left behind fairly quickly. So we'll see you. Keep an eye out. Like, share, comment. Really appreciate it. It'll keep me going. And I just, I just really appreciate your support, right? I just wish it was more, more visual, more obvious. And I'll be sharing AI agents and software that I use in the future with you. So have a great one, folks. I just want to touch base real quick. This was meant to be a quickie, and then we're off to the races. Ciao.